Good evening and welcome, especially to Rosa's nieces and nephews and her friends, and to those who are watching on Zoom out in the rest of the world. Let us pray. Here we are, excuse me, here we are, Lord, gathered to celebrate the life of our sister Rose. She has offered you a long life of service to your people. Welcome her into the fullness of your love. Rejoice with her as she joins family and friends who have gone before her. Grant her the peace in your presence that she has been longing for. We ask this in the name of your Son, Jesus. Please be seated. We will now have a biography read by Sister Eleanor Craig.
Rose Colley has left us several accounts of her life and work, each account a valuable glimpse into the dedication and choices of a woman religious in the second half of the 20th century. No doubt, much of Rose's autobiography will appear in print. For this occasion, it seems only right to focus on her life with family and with Loretto, for we are the ones who will miss her most. Here is Rose's introduction of herself. On the cold night of January 15th, 1928, Mary Agnes Geist Colley made her first trip to the hospital and gave birth to her sixth child, Rose Teresa Colley. Her husband and my father, William Hubert Colley, was with her. An interesting thing about names, when I came along, Mom wanted to name me for Saint Teresa of Lisieux, the little flower. On my birth certificate, they had named me Frances Therese. But family legend tells me that the children didn't like the Frances. So they put names in a hat and drew out Rose. And as Rose Therese, I was baptized. There were altogether 10 children, 7 older and 2 younger than Rose. All appear in the following little story, except Margaret, who was already married. Soon after we moved into the house our father built in 1938, Patrick was born, and the following spring we were invaded by scarlet fever. Ags got it first. Then, on the day we were supposed to come out of quarantine, I got it. Same thing happened to Seth. Hugh and Bert were both away at school. Dot went to live with Elizabeth, and John had to clean out the chicken coop and sleep out there so he could help with the chores and still go to school. Before Seth came out of quarantine, he came down with strep throat and died. He was 4. We were members of Holy Name Parish on Woodland Street in Nashville. When Bert finished 8th grade and enrolled at St. Cecilia's Academy, the rest of the girls went there also. I was in the 4th grade. We continued at the academy until I was starting the 10th grade and Ags the 11th. She asked if she could go somewhere else to school. Because the family had lived in El Paso for a couple of years a decade earlier, just a couple of blocks from the just being built Loretto Academy, Dad wrote to see if we could go there to school, and we did. In August of 1941, Mom and Dad took us on the train to El Paso. The year went fairly well. The sisters were very good to us. Sister Margaret Loyola was the principal. Aggs was especially fond of Sister Martha Marie Bradfish and stayed in touch with her for many years. Sisters Rose Clare and Teresa Clare were in charge of the grade school boarders, and as I always claimed to be named after them, I spent much time with them, and also with Sister Jean Patrice Golden, with whom I had a lifelong friendship. The next summer, back in Nashville, Aggs decided to return to St. Cecilia after just that 1 year, but I returned to El Paso. During retreat, my senior year, I finally became convinced that I should enter Loretto. I wrote home about it, and my father was very upset. He asked me to postpone my decision, which I did. After graduation in 1945, I worked for an advertising department of a department store, and then I took Ag's place as office manager for Acuff Rose Publishing Company. My boss was Fred Rose, a composer of country music and partner with Roy Acuff. On my 18th birthday, Dad sat me down and said that although it was not what he wanted for me, I was free to do whatever I wanted with my life. This was one of his greatest gifts to me because it helped me to see that I had to be responsible for my decisions. I wrote to Mother Eduarda immediately and arranged to enter in the fall of 1946. In June, I took some vacation time and went to El Paso to see Sister Jean Patrice so she could help me get my novitiate clothes together. When I came home and went back to work, I came to think that since things were going so well, I would postpone going to the convent. And so I wrote to Mother Eduarda to that effect. I also wrote to Jean Patrice, and she asked me to come to Kansas City where she had been transferred. I went for a weekend, and her words of wisdom for me were, "Whatever you do is fine with me, but make a decision and do it now. Don't try to straddle the fence." So after much more thought, I decided. Mother and Daddy drove me to Loretto on Sunday, October 27th, 1946, 2 days late because I had to finish my 2 weeks' notice to Acuff Rose. In the company of a large class of creative and energetic young women, Rose received the habit on April 25th, 1947, and with it, the name Sister John Martin. She made her first vows 2 years later, and her final vows on August 15th, 1952. Rose's full autobiography, too lengthy for this remembrance, gives inspiring details of Loretto contributions in the areas of racial justice. In her work choices, she embodied the values, determination, compassion, and creativity of so many Loretto sisters who applied their considerable educational skills to the problems of society and the needs of individuals and groups who were addressing those problems. On the occasion of her 50th Jubilee, Rose summarized her work in this way. In this, my 50th year as a Sister of Loretto, I am a mediator, facilitator, trainer in mediation and in conflict management. And sometimes I'm the manager of Just Solutions, a full-service mediation center in Louisville, Kentucky. I am also a feminist, a Democrat, and probably what some would call a knee-jerk liberal. How in the world did I get here from a Nashville semi-rural eighth child in a family who went off to El Paso, Texas to school? A lot of the answer is probably in that last sentence. I fell in love with the Sisters of Loretto and decided to join them. After the novitiate, I spent 12 years teaching elementary school in Cape Girardeau and St. Louis. While in St. Louis, I graduated from Webster College and completed a master's degree in education at St. Louis University. In 1961, I landed as principal at Christ the King School in Louisville, just as the white exodus from the West End was beginning. By the time I left Christ the King to become supervisor of the parochial schools, the enrollment had dropped from over 600 to just 300, and I was heavily involved and committed to the struggle for open housing in the West End. As a Catholic school supervisor, I was able to carry out my commitment to civil rights in numerous ways, including hiring Ceciliana Skees as director of the Catholic Schools Head Start program. In 1970, I went to work for the University of Louisville as field coordinator for the Teacher Corps program. Teacher Corps involved a lot of teamwork and conflict management, and when it was over, I made my way to a Loretto staff position, moving to Denver and beginning my traveling career. Working with Loretto co-member Suzanne Terry introduced me to mediation and led to increasing my facilitating and training skills. For about 10 years, I made my living as a consultant and facilitator to many religious communities throughout the US, with a couple of opportunities to work with international groups in England and Rome, and then to do some training in Zimbabwe and Ghana. In 1986, I returned to Louisville, and in 1991, found the Council on Peacemaking, which had just begun that first nonprofit mediation center in Louisville. I was fortunate to be hired as the director of the mediation program, and I hope to work there for about 10 more years. That's what she said in 1997. She worked there until about 2010. My faith journey has been shaped by all these works, moving me out again beyond the Catholic ghetto and increasing my appreciation of all people of faith. I have relied on Loretto for the nourishment of my spiritual life. Loretto gives me the strength to live by my convictions, and my friends encourage and inspire me to keep on keeping on.
Our response. divine being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I will praise you, for I am fearfully, wonderfully made. I will sing your works. I know this very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in secret, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw me, unformed body. All the days were written in your book and ordained for me before one of them came to be.
A reading from Romans. Who will separate us from Christ's love? Will we be separated by trouble or distress or harassment or famine or nakedness or danger or sword? But in all these things, we win a sweeping victor through the one who loved us. I'm convinced that nothing can separate us from God's love in Christ Jesus our Lord. Not death or life, not angels or rulers, not present things or future things, not powers or height or depth or any other thing that is created.
Our responses from I Am the Way, our guidebook. Only trust in your grace, expecting everything from God's goodness. The vocation to be a sister of Loretto shows itself in a spirit of courage and generosity marked by trust in God. Vocational commitment includes lifelong development, a continuing process of becoming more human and more like Christ. We believe that the prayer of every member adds to the well-being of the community as a whole, and that the prayer of the community nourishes the life of each member. Our prayer and suffering, offered and born in love, becomes apostolic activities, just as our works of ministry done through love become prayer. In our prayer, we remember with gratitude those members of the community who have gone before us in faith, as well as all those persons who assist us in any way. God of mercy, your servant Rose believed in and faithfully followed her vocation. She entered into the life of this community with an open and loving heart, generously sharing her knowledge and skills with hundreds of other people, and was dearly loved by many. Knowing that her life was pleasing to you, we willingly give her back to you. May she rest in your gentle love. Amen. We will now have sharing. Give us a minute to get set up. When you come up to the microphone, we ask that you give your name first. And we'll start here at the Mother House, and then if there are people elsewhere on Zoom that want to speak, we'll tune in to them.
Good evening, I'm Deborah Kale, co-member Loretto's. The email I got recently about Rose, I called Joan Powers, I'm here with tonight, and Wheel of Fortune was on. So I'm dialing and the phone is ringing, and I knew Joan's message recorder was going to kick in. In my other ear, on the Wheel of Fortune, I heard a ding. And the $1,000 bonus was, the word was pay it forward. Joan, so I leave Joan a message and she calls me the next day. So I tell her about Rose and her wake. And I told her the message from Rose, pay it forward. I used to help Rose with her computer when she lived in Louisville. So she was downsizing and making her way here. She had a lamp that sat by her recliner. She was turning it on and having trouble. It was flickering and she was fussing at it. And she says, do you know how to get this darn thing working? You can even have it and take it, just take it, get it out of here. And so it sits beside my bed and I use it every night. So she's still the light in my life, and love you, Rose.
Agnes Ann Shum. I have many memories of Rose from days in Denver. Number of things to share, but one of them was we had developed a relationship of mentor and mentee, I guess. And she said, we can only continue meeting like this if we're meeting as friends. And that was the way Rose worked. I was one of the recipients of her facilitator training and mediation training, and I appreciated that a lot. But one of the fun things that many people here might not know, I remember a Christmas brunch one time, and she says, you know, I'm related to Minnie Pearl. And so she went, when she got back home, she put on her answering machine Minnie Pearl's voice for that Christmas day. So there was that playful side of her too, which I really appreciated. But she had so many gifts and she gave so willingly and was such a teacher about so many different things that we're richly rewarded. Appreciate it.
I'm Michael Ginsberg, and when Rose's autobiography was read, there was a mention of teacher corps in 1970. Well, I was one of 50 interns who thought we knew everything there was to know and found out pretty quickly that that wasn't the case. And I was one of the 50 who Rose rescued. But I'm not here to talk about her because I couldn't get through that. But what I do want to say is, among the many gifts that Rose gave me was the gift of all of you. Just the most wonderful women I've ever met. Ceciliana, I adore you. The rest of you, my wife and friends and I have been coming down to visit Rose for however long she's been here. And even when she was fading, there was the joy of spending time with all of you. And I thank you. You are wonderful women.
I'm Mike Hargrove, nephew to Rose. And, sorry. And, oops. Aunt Rose was Aunt Rose, Sister John Martin, Sister Rose, but mostly she was Aunt Rose. And all my life, she brought joy to all of us in our family. It seemed that whenever Rose was around, things were a little bit lighter, a little bit easier. I remember one time when I was in high school, we were visiting Rose in St. Louis, and she told us about an experience she had in one of the classes there. Since she was probably principal at that time, I think she must have been subbing for a music teacher or something, but she was in a music room, and they were, I guess it was choir, because she was teaching them the song that that a lot of you will remember, but I won't tell you the title and tell you the rest of the story. She had told us that she had started like this to get the audience participation, and somebody in the back of the class had shouted out, "She's got the whole world in her hands," which was what she did have. She certainly encompassed this world. She went a lot of different places. And I think she held everybody gently in her hands. And that's what I will remember.
I'm Terry, and I'm Rose's niece, and I'm also her namesake. I'm a Teresa as well, and we share a birthday. My birthday is the 15th of January, so I always felt like Aunt Rose and I had a special connection anyway. I'm a baby of my family, so I have a different relationship with Aunt Rose than everybody else. I did a lot of traveling with my mom and dad. They traveled with Aunt Rose a lot. They did a lot of exploring. And after my dad passed away, Aunt Rose was my mom's constant companion. Aunt Rose was that aunt. Everybody in the family gives something special to me. And Aunt Rose was that aunt that would always just sit and listen to whatever I had to say. And she always made me feel very special. And I thank her for that. And I thank her for that gift of being able to get along with anyone, whether you see eye to eye or feel the same way about things. She was always loving, and we're going to miss her a lot.
I'm not real sure I can do this. Rose and I were great friends, and we had good times together, especially during those 10 or 12 years that she had one of her friends owned a house on the Outer Banks. And I went with them most of the time. And her sister Dot drove. We would fly across North Carolina 90 miles an hour. I'm not kidding. I was in the front seat, and that's what it said, 90 miles. And I said, how many tickets do you get? And she said, I've never gotten a ticket. Well, she was going too fast for them to catch her, I guess. But anyway, we had great times, and Dot and it would always bring a puzzle, a big puzzle, and we would work that. But Rose only put one piece in each year. She didn't really care for puzzles. But Rose knew how to play, and she knew how to work. And she was always my supporter. And I know for sure that I could not have done the work I did if she hadn't been behind me, telling me, you can do it. So I did it. And I have a letter here that's from her partner, Janet Jernigan, with whom she worked for 20 years. Janet asked me to read this. She's on her way back from the Outer Banks right now, and she should be home. Maybe she's home now and she can hear this, but she will be here tomorrow. And she came to see Rose when she was in the hospital those few days. She came 3 of the days and sat with her. That's real love. My name is Janet Jernigan, and I was very fortunate to work with Rose at Just Solutions Mediation Services for over 20 years. I'm not with you tonight as I'm returning from Cape Hatteras, North Carolina, a place that was close to Rose's heart. She would have loved being here these 2 weeks to enjoy the warm breezes and spectacular starry sky. I'm comforted to know that she is now among the heavenly bodies I love to look at. In the 20 years I worked with Rose, she trained me and hundreds of other people to manage conflict more productively and to help clients resolve their differences through mediation. She taught me the skills of group facilitation and shared her clear thinking and wonderful facility at asking disarming questions. She was good at that. I still hear from mediators that she trained years ago who share that it was one of the best trainings they ever participated in, and how Rose's knowledge stays with them. I remember one training where Rose had conducted a mediation demonstration. After the demonstration, she asked for comments from the trainees. One gentleman, who was a fierce advocate for his family law clinics, told Rose that he didn't see her do anything. Rose accepted his comment and then asked the other training participants what they observed. Everyone chimed in with their observations of Rose's many skills. The gentleman then said he guessed that was why he needed the training. He has become a skillful mediator who truly helps people, thanks to Rose. As the executive director of Just Solutions, Rose brought a uniquely collaborative approach to working with her colleagues. At least twice a year, we would meet to discuss our jobs and what work we were enjoying and what work we weren't crazy about. Then we talked and traded jobs until we were all satisfied with how the work would go on. I am so grateful to Rose for all that she shared with me, and I'm honored to share with others what she has taught me. Rose lived the mission of the Sisters of Loretto by working for justice and acting for peace. Her legacy will continue, in the lives of all the people she trained and in the lives of all the people who continue to train. We love you, Rose.
I'm Maureen McCormick, a sister of Loretto, and my connections with Rose stem from her years in Denver. Rose was not only the wonderfully skilled person that people have talked about, but she was a keen observer of everything that went on around her. And one of the funny stories I remember was we were a group of us in a car going somewhere, and a car came along that was taking half of the road from one side of the road and half from the other side of the road. And she says, he's taking his half right out of the middle.
I'm Doug Griggs. A mention was made of Teacher Corps. Michael and a lot of other wonderful interns were a part of that. I was a new principal of the school where all these interns were. I'm obviously a slow learner because Rose worked with me for 3 years before I learned very much about being a principal, but I did learn that. There's a side of Rose that no one has mentioned. At some point, I asked her when she stopped wearing the habit, because I certainly never saw her wear it. And she kind of smiled and said, well, I was supervising Catholic elementary schools in Louisville, and I decided I didn't need to wear it anymore. And she said, I went to this one church, and the priest met me at the door and said, we don't know you, go away.
Wait, just a minute, sweetie.
Tell them your name, Ann.
My name is Ann Spillane. And it's most unusual that you would find me standing behind the mic. It's just a timidity on my part. But it was to not honor Rose, I just couldn't bear to do. So I mentioned dissension, her love of books. You can sit and read by the hour. Another thing is that we enjoyed the same things at home and was a good cook. And I'm just thinking of little things that made her a very special person. Thank you to her family and to us. Thank you.
You can hold it. I'm Kathleen Vanderhaar. And for Teresa Coyle has a great love for Rose. When she was first sent out, she went to St. Michael's. 2 months later, her mother died. And it was a very difficult time, but life had to go on. And she said what a gift it was, how generous Rose was, because she would listen and that she understood what Teresa was going through at that time. And again, when in Louisville, when Teresa was at a point where she needed a job, it was Rose saying, I need someone, you're it. And so the two of them worked together as Rose started her new business.
Jean, are you there?
Yes, I am, Sister Eileen. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I thank you for the Mother House for sharing. And if anyone else on Zoom would like to share, we ask that you now please go ahead and unmute yourselves.
Jean, this is Barbara in Louisville.
Yes, please.
Barbara Nicholas, a sister of Loretto here in Louisville. My deep prayer and sympathy to all who have spoken tonight, and all of you and her family and friends who really love her her whole life and miss her now. I was thinking of myself as one who received from Rose the opportunity to learn mediation skills at a training that she offered here in Louisville. And I was working at the time at the Baptist Hospital, and I wished, having experienced the training, to have really developed those skills better. But what I so appreciated in the training that Rose led in a real group, varied group of people, she had other presenters who had been trained by her to come and speak with us. And to a person, they just honored her so profoundly for what they had learned, and now were demonstrating by their own teaching of new people how to do the training. We don't often get to see each other at work out there in the world. And so that's a real special experience for me, and I have valued it all these years. And so thank you, Rose, for that and for your love of this community. That's all.
Jean. This is Mary Catherine Rabbit in Denver. I have many, many, many wonderful memories of Rose. I first met her when I started on the staff in Denver in 1975, and we did all kinds of things together. We traveled together, vacationed together, camped together, laughed, went to concerts, did all kinds of things, and always maintained a friendship. And what I think of when I think of Rose, I think of a loyal, faithful friend. There was nobody that was more loyal to her friends than Rose. She was there when you needed her, and she reached out to people wherever she was. But she was also a great storyteller. And some of my favorite stories were about her father, Hubert Colley. She could tell those stories and just make the whole room explode in laughter. And one in particular, I remember, Rose, a number of us went to the very first women's ordination conference in Detroit. I think it was 1978 or somewhere around that time. And she was telling her dad that she was going to this, and he just kind of sat at the kitchen table and thought about it, and he said, "Women been doing all the work and men been getting all the credit. You girls go for it."
Would anyone else on Zoom like to also share? There is a message from Dr. Campbell, who put a message on the chat section for Zoom that, if I may, I'd like to read to everyone. Dr. Campbell says this: "I am eternally thankful for all of the work that Rose did over the 40 years of my career as a social worker in Louisville, Kentucky. There are so many lives that have been touched by her. I was blessed to interact with her during our time with the Sisters in History. One of our greats has gone on, and she will be greatly missed." Thank you, Dr. Campbell. If there are no other memories to share now, we will go back to the Mother House, please.
Anyone else here? Okay. We give you glory, thanks, and praise. Oh, bless our hearts and guide our way. Glory, 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 glory. We give you glory, thanks, and praise. Thank you, everyone.